Hello and welcome to another GMT driving school video. In this one we're going to look at the subject of clearance and the relationship of space and speed. So your golden rule here is to think about if you're getting closer to an object, you're going to have to slow down to manage the risk of what might happen. So this is partially anticipation. So you can see on this diagram here that we're trying to put in a meter gap from any parked vehicles if we're doing the full 30 mile an hour in the zone. So the faster we go, the more dangerous it is to make alternative actions like braking or steering. So we do want that meter away. So to help you out, we have this formula. So at 30 mile an hour, as you can see on the left, we want about 3 foot or a meter away from parked objects. And in the middle, we've got 2 foot away from the parked object, so you want to be 20 mile an hour. And if you're only a foot away from objects, then you'll want about 10 mile an hour. And that's going to manage the risk of someone stepping out or opening the door. Now I'm just going to have a quick look at some of the common errors. And this one here that's highlighted is the student pulling towards parked cars when they're seeing a car way in the distance. They often overreact. Instead of waiting to get the safe zone, they'll steer left. And I've seen that on tests plenty. Also, they'll tend to weave in and out of traffic rather than holding a nice meter distance from the parked cars at 30. You know, there is space there, just go straight forward down the line and not sweep in and out of the gaps. It's quite disconcerting for everyone. And then on that third example there, it's being more biased to the parked cars rather than the oncoming cars, a natural fear of the road ahead. So in that green car position, it's very dangerous if someone steps out or the red car door opens. So these are 3 common faults that you see quite. I often get asked the question about when you've got 2 parked cars, who gets right of way here? Well, neither of you really. It depends who gets themselves into that space first. So if it's you, you're clear to go. And don't make the common mistake, and that is if someone else is coming towards you and you've already committed to the space, don't start moving your car left towards the parked cars. You see that all the time, and I've seen it a few times on tests where it's failed a candidate. They'll start committing to a space that were rightfully theirs, like in this top bit here, they'd steer left now, and it'll be too soon just because they're scared of the oncoming lane. So in this example here, I'm just going to do a quick commentary on this one. So you can see we have to move out the way of that oncoming car, and then the student leaves the car very close to the left-hand edge. Well, the problem is people stepping out or opening the door, especially kids chasing balls. You know, they come out so quickly and you just can't react. So being this close to parked cars, especially when there's a clear oncoming lane, there's really no excuse for that other than a kind of a lapse of judgment, not thinking about every time you pass a car what might happen. So I guess that's basic anticipation. But you can see from this position here, it's far too tight to the left when there's no inherent danger with moving to the right. So that's why we call it risk management. Okay, in this example, it's a really good example, this one actually, of psychology, right? Poor psychology. So you can see that delivery person stepping out, but you see me now throwing the car across the road towards this oncoming vehicle. And of course, we're massively safe with the space we have there. It's just that the learner was just concentrating on the oncoming vehicle, and that's very normal, but it takes a little practice, a little while to get out of that. If a bus can make it through that gap and be safe, certainly your car can. So we should have been over at the right hand side on the white line anyway for adequate clearance to the left. It's just I had to get involved there. And as normal, you know, learners will definitely look at that oncoming lane and be super worried about maybe hitting them or being hit. I think that's just part of the early fears of driving. Now let's compare that to a pretty good example here. So we can see we've got a driver getting into the van up front there. So the learner has decided to hold back. I mean, the hold back position's really good as well. We didn't sweep to the left, so the driver can still see well down the road. And they've deemed that unsafe to get through the gap, which I think is bang on in this instance. I don't think there's any rush to get through there and potentially put danger on the road. So that was a really good example of defensive driving. These next 2 examples are bus examples. So buses are really dangerous for this reason. You know, people stepping out in front of you once the bus is pulled in. I've seen that accident before, someone stepping out and getting hit. It's really horrible. And the mistake I see more often than not is the speed and the clearance from the bus, especially in these 2 examples where there's a lot of road space to use. This one's slightly better because of speed, but if you rewind back, look at the first one, it's just too fast and too close to be that safe. So in this example, we've got an area where visibility is really, really poor, and there's quite a lot of hard steering going on. So you can imagine that cars would probably tend to cross the mid-lane when they're getting around the corner, especially if you're a little bit too fast. So coming up to this blind corner, we can kind of anticipate that a larger vehicle or any vehicle could be on our side of the road. And there's the parked car there. So you know that the car could potentially come around that object, as it does here. So this is my reaction on the stop here, as the car is really close to us on the right hand side. So let's watch that in full speed and you'll see the quick stop. There it was there. Alright, now to the good examples. So what we've got here is a really good interaction between the learner driver, the parked vehicles, and an oncoming vehicle. You can see that the speed is really manageable, so if someone stepped out or a door opened, you would be able to do something about that. So the white car is moving over into space, and then we'll kind of move a few inches to the left and back out. But at the right speed, that's all very manageable and very passable. As learners are starting to get a bit more proficient and more skillful with the car, I'll often tell them that sometimes they really will need to get quite close to oncoming objects just to make the situation safe and workable. So in this example, I think it's just a really good example of how we've got a path to the left, a large vehicle to the right, and the learner does such a good job with just squeezing through that gap and not making anything less safe. So it's a good speed and it's a very skillful position. That's the kind of skill you're going to need eventually to pass your test. In this good example again, we've got the application of the 10-mile-an-hour rule. So we're thinking we're going to get really close to these parked objects, looking far down the road over to the right, so see if there's any oncoming vehicles so we can squeeze in any potential gaps, like here on the left. If there was a car coming at us, we could just nip in there. But don't worry, you don't have to rush that, remember. Most learners react quickly when they see an oncoming vehicle like it's some kind of Mad Max scene. They are not going to plough into your bonnet. Alright, it's not London. Well, it's Morpeth, so it's not far like. So all these gaps on the left, we could just gently glide in those gaps and let any oncoming vehicles through. But in this instance, very residential, could be kids, old ladies, you know, opening doors, whatever. So it's a lovely speed and a lovely position to play all down here. So remember that. So as an additional note, remember when you are passing vehicles on your side, if you're coming up to a junction, you must come back into position. Learners often forget that and stay in the oncoming lane. I've included this just kind of little bonus. So what we've got here is a uphill rise with a crest and a badly parked vehicle to the left. So getting the speed right there is absolutely crucial. The clearance is good anyway, but I think you need to slow down a little bit for the potential of anyone coming at you. And in this final scene, we've got to put this little additional amendment in there of the 2-second rule. So remember, whatever speed you're traveling, you need to keep at least a 2-second gap. That will give you enough time to think, to act, brake, and then not hit the vehicle in front. And as you can see from this example, if you watch that little red arrow, the student does a really good job of just keeping a nice 2-second rule from them, and they don't really waver that. When it goes wrong often, or more often than not, is if a car's overtaken us and it's swept in front. I've seen that fail before, where a car is swept in front of us and the learner hasn't backed off. You know, it's your job to keep the 2-second rule, even if someone's driving like a complete and utter plum bag. So it's up to you to keep that 2-second rule. It's for your safety as well as the people in front. And remember, if someone's tailgating you from behind, think about your theory. The idea is not to speed up, it's to actually slow down in case you need to react to any braking in front of you. Alright, that's it for this video. Stay safe, remember your clearance. That subject is an absolute constant. You will always need it. So, yeah, take care out there.